Cast out as the family's shame, now they begged the billionaire's ghost daughter for forgiveness. The rain drummed against the mansion's windows like nervous fingers. Inside the grand hall, 7 people knelt in a pathetic line on the same Italian marble that had once gleamed beneath their arrogant feet. Now that shine reflected only tears and despair. She stood with her back to them. Her silhouette, outlined against the grey afternoon light, looked like it belonged to another world. Perhaps because to them she always had a ghost, a stain, a mistake. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she held. The Ashford family's signet ring, the one she'd once been denied, the one that now belonged to her by right of blood, will and long-delayed justice, forgiveness. The matriarch's voice came weak, almost childlike. "Please, forgive us." She didn't turn around, only tilted her head slightly as if listening to the wind. And then, with a calm that hurt more than any scream, she whispered, "One day you cast me out as your shame. Today you learn the price of the shame you buried alive." 15 years earlier, that same mansion had witnessed another scene, another rain, another gate closing, but this time, forever. Helena Ashford was 17 when she was dragged out of the only home she had ever known, not for a crime, not for violence, but for existing. Her mother, Clara, had been the family's maid, beautiful, discreet, invisible, until Richard Ashford, the patriarch, noticed her. One night was enough, one lie too, and 9 months later, Helena was born, the living proof of a sin the family would never admit publicly. Richard bought Clara's silence with a modest sum, and a promise that the girl would be tolerated, but never acknowledged. She lived in the servants' wing, ate alone, studied at home. She was the family's hidden shame, a shadow attached to a name they adored. But everything changed when Clara died. Without her mother to shield her, Helena became the target. "You don't belong to this family," Richard's lawful wife said, her voice colder than stone. "And you never did." That night Helena was thrown out. No money, no papers, no goodbye, only a crumpled letter in her pocket, one her mother had hidden for years, a letter that would change everything. Helena didn't cry as she crossed the iron gate. She didn't look back, she didn't beg, she just walked. Barefoot, rain soaking her simple dress, while the weight of the world pressed down on her teenage shoulders. Behind her, the mansion remained lit. The windows gleamed like indifferent eyes. Inside, the Ashford family resumed their routine, as if nothing had happened, as if a human life could be erased as easily as closing a door. Richard Ashford watched from his office window, sipping whiskey. He didn't feel remorse. He felt relief. "It had to be done," he said to his wife, Victoria, who entered the room with a satisfied expression. "She was a living reminder of your weakness," Victoria replied, adjusting the pearls around her neck. "Now finally we can move on." But Richard couldn't stop watching the small figure disappearing into the darkness of the road. Something was wrong. Something he couldn't name. Helena walked for 3 hours before reaching the city centre. Her legs ached, her stomach growled, but she didn't stop. She couldn't, because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant breaking down. She found shelter in an abandoned church. The roof leaked. The floor was covered in dust, but it was a place. And at that moment, that was enough. She pulled the letter from her pocket, the one her mother had hidden under the mattress, sealed with a name Helena would never forget, Theodore Whitmore. Her hands trembled as she tore open the envelope. Inside, only 3 handwritten lines. "If anything happens to me, find this man. He's your real father. Richard never was. Forgive me for lying. Clara." Helena read it 3 times, then 3 more. Finally, the tears came. Everything had been a lie. Everything. Richard wasn't her father. She had been raised in a prison built on someone else's deceit, and now, cast out from that lie, she was alone in the world, but with a name she would repeat like a mantra in the days ahead. Theodore Whitmore. The first months were pure survival. Helena slept in shelters, worked in laundries, cleaned bathrooms, served coffee in bars where no one looked her in the eye. She saved every penny, ate less, slept less, but she didn't give up. Because now she had a purpose, to find Theodore Whitmore. She searched public libraries, dug through old records, until 6 months later she found him. Theodore Whitmore was a billionaire entrepreneur in the technology and renewable energy sector. He lived in New York. He had never married, had no known heirs, and at 63, he was dying. Helena saved enough to buy a bus ticket to New York. The trip took 2 days. She slept leaning against the window, clutching the letter to her chest like a talisman. When she arrived at the front of the building where Theodore lived, a glass skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, she almost turned back, almost gave up, because suddenly, reality hit her. What if he didn't believe her? What if he cast her out too? But then she remembered the rain, the gate, the cruel silence, and she knocked. The door was answered by a private nurse, a middle-aged woman, tired but kind. "He doesn't take visitors," she said politely but firmly. "I'm his daughter," Helena replied, in a voice that didn't sound like her own. The nurse hesitated. Then she saw something in the girl's eyes, something real. "Wait here." Theodore Whitmore was in bed when the nurse entered and whispered something to him. He frowned, then, with a frail voice, said, "Send her in." Helena entered the room, as if stepping into a dream or a nightmare. He was thin, pale, connected to tubes and softly beeping machines, but his eyes were alive, intelligent, and when they met hers, they widened. "You," he began, but his voice broke. Helena stepped forward and handed him the letter. "My mother was Clara Mendez. She said you're my father." Theodore took the letter with trembling hands. He read it, reread it, then closed his eyes, a tear tracing down his wrinkled face. "Clara," he whispered. "My God, Clara." He looked at Helena again, this time with recognition, with pain, with late-blooming love. "I didn't know," he said, voice cracking. "I swear to God, I didn't know." In the days that followed, Theodore told his story. He and Clara had met on a business trip years earlier. They had a brief romance, but then he had to travel, and when he returned, Clara was gone. He tried to find her, but couldn't. Years later, by chance, he learned she was working for the Ashfords, but when he went looking for her, he was stopped. Richard Ashford had threatened him, said Clara was fine, that she didn't want to be found. Theodore believed him and moved on, but he never forgot. Now, looking at Helena, seeing Clara's eyes reflected in the daughter he never knew, he felt the weight of every lost year. "You are my daughter," he said, taking her hand, "and I will make this right. I swear I will." That night, Theodore called his lawyers and changed his will. The next 2 years were years of transformation. Theodore Whitmore, even while battling the cancer that was consuming his body, devoted every remaining drop of energy to knowing, educating, and preparing Helena. She was no longer the girl cast out in the rain. She became a student of corporate law and business administration. She learned about her father's companies, met his partners, attended meetings, and above all, she learned to walk with her head held high. Theodore introduced her as his daughter, without shame, without hesitation. And to Helena, that meant more than any fortune ever could. "You are not a bastard," he told her one evening as they drank tea in his apartment. "You are my heir, my daughter, and the world will know it." Helena smiled, but inside, a part of her still carried the scars. She still dreamed of the rain, of the gate, of Victoria's cold eyes. Theodore died on an autumn morning, in his sleep, peacefully, with Helena holding his hand. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there staring at the serene face of the man who in only 2 years had given her more love than 17 years of rejection. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." And then, finally, the tears came. The funeral was discreet. Helena wanted no attention, but the press found out, and when they did, the explosion was immediate. Billionaire Theodore Whitmore leaves entire fortune to unknown daughter. Secret heiress. Who is Helena Mendez? DNA confirms maid's daughter is sole heir to billion-dollar empire. The headlines spread like wildfire, and within a week, Helena's name was everywhere, including inside the Ashford mansion. Victoria Ashford dropped her teacup when she read the headline on her tablet. The dark liquid spread across the linen tablecloth, but she didn't notice. "Richard!" she screamed, her sharp voice echoing through the house. "Richard!" He entered the dining room, confused. "What is it?" Victoria turned the tablet toward him. Her hands trembled so violently the screen shook. Richard read it, and his face went pale. "No," he murmured. "It can't be." But it was. There it was. Helena's photo. Older, more confident, more beautiful, standing beside Theodore Whitmore in an old photograph from when he was still alive. And beside it, the official announcement of the will reading. Sole heir, Helena Whitmore Mendez. Victoria sat down slowly, as if her legs had been cut from under her. She's back," she whispered. Richard didn't answer, because he knew exactly what that meant. They had lost everything. The reading of the will took place in an elite law firm in Manhattan. The room was lined with dark wood, shelves filled with old books, and a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling like a silent threat. Helena sat at the head of the table. She wore a tailored black suit, her hair neatly tied in an elegant bun. No jewelry, except for the signet ring Theodore had given her before he died. Across the table, 3 lawyers reviewed documents with neutral expressions, and on the opposite side, 2 empty chairs waited. "Will she come?" one of the lawyers asked. "They will come," Helena corrected, her voice steady. "I sent the invitation, and they came." Richard and Victoria Ashford entered the room like survivors of a shipwreck. He was hunched, dark circles under his eyes. She tried to maintain her aristocratic posture, but her red, sleepless eyes betrayed her. They froze when they saw Helena. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Richard took a hesitant step forward. "Helena," he began, his voice trembling. "Sit down," Helena interrupted, emotionless. They obeyed. The head lawyer cleared his throat and began, "We are here for the official reading of the will of Mr. Theodore Elias Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore left clear and specific instructions regarding the distribution of his estate." He paused, glancing at Helena. "The entirety of his fortune, including stocks, properties, investments, and liquid assets, valued at approximately $4.7 billion, is bequeathed to his only daughter and legitimate heir, Helena Whitmore Mendes." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria closed her eyes. Richard lowered his head, but the lawyer wasn't finished. "Additionally, Mr. Whitmore left a special clause." He opened a sealed envelope and read aloud, "To the Ashford family, you cast my daughter out as if she were garbage. You treated her as shame. You denied her love, dignity, and the right to her own name. Know this: every cent you hope to inherit through your connections, every deal you plan to close using my name, every door you expected to open, all of it now belongs to her, and she will decide whether you deserve mercy. As for me, I've already decided. You deserve nothing." The lawyer folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. Victoria began to cry. Richard remained motionless, like a statue of salt. "That is all," the lawyer said. "The reading is concluded." Helena stood. She picked up her bag, and without looking back, she walked toward the door. "Helena!" Richard shouted, standing up. "Please, wait!" She stopped, didn't turn, just stopped. We made a mistake," he said, his voice breaking with desperation. "Forgive us, please." Victoria also stood, staggering. "We didn't know," she cried, hysterical. "We didn't know he was your father. If we had known—" "If you had known," Helena finally turned, her eyes cold as ice, "you would have treated me like trash anyway. Because the problem was never who my father was. The problem was that I existed." She took a step toward them, and both stepped back. "You cast me out because I was inconvenient, because I was proof that your perfect husband had weaknesses, because I existed, and that was intolerable. Forgive us," Richard pleaded, and for the first time in his life, he looked small. Helena met his eyes, and then, with a cruel calm, she said, "Forgiveness? You want forgiveness? Then find it the same way I found dignity, alone, in the rain, with no one to hear you." And she walked out. 6 months later, Helena was back. But not as the girl who had been cast out, nor as the newly discovered heiress. She returned as a ghost made flesh, as silent vengeance, as the embodiment of every sin they had tried to bury. She bought the mortgage on the Ashford mansion, which was about to be auctioned off due to accumulated debts and poor financial management. She took control of the companies Richard had founded, but which now relied heavily on outside investors. And she blocked every single attempt they made to secure credit, loans, or financial backing. Not with violence, not with threats, just with power. The first time they saw her again was at an elite charity gala. Helena entered the ballroom on the arm of a powerful businessman, wearing a couture gown worth more than the Ashfords' former annual allowance. She didn't seek them out. She didn't need to, because every gaze in the room was on her, and every whisper too. "She's Whitmore's daughter. They kicked her out, you know, and now she owns everything. They say she's going to destroy the Ashford family." Victoria, standing in a corner of the hall, felt her legs weaken when she saw Helena. She tried to leave, but Richard grabbed her arm. "No," he said hoarsely. "We need to talk to her." But when they tried to approach, they were stopped by discreet security guards. "Miss Whitmore does not wish to be disturbed," one of them said politely but firmly. And so they stood there, watching, powerless, like ghosts in their own lives. In the following weeks, the pressure intensified. One by one, Victoria's children, from a previous marriage, began appearing in the media, entangled in financial scandals, shell companies, embezzlement, tax evasion. None of it was false. Everything was documented, but someone had made sure the right documents reached the right hands, and that someone had a name: Helena. Richard tried to call, sent letters, messages. He even went to her office in Manhattan, but Helena never replied. She didn't need to, because her silence spoke louder than any scream ever could. One night, Richard finally saw her again, not by invitation, but because he waited outside the restaurant where she was dining until she came out. It was raining, just like that night. He was soaked, shivering, his heavy coat clinging to his body. When she stepped outside, he took a step forward. "Helena, please." She stopped under the awning, sheltered from the rain, and looked at him. For a moment, Richard saw something in her eyes. Maybe pity, maybe recognition. But then she said, "You're blocking my way," and she walked past him as if he were air. It was that night Richard realized she wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply existing, and her very existence, in the space they had tried to erase her from, was the greatest revenge of all. The fall was gradual, but relentless. First came the businesses. Richard had built a small real estate investment empire over decades, but everything depended on credit, connections, and reputation. Helena didn't destroy anything directly. She just withdrew support. A phone call here, a meeting quietly cancelled there, an investor who changed their mind, a bank that re-evaluated the risk. Within 6 months, Richard's company was collapsing. Then came the mansion. The vast estate that had been the Ashford family's symbol of status for 3 generations was put up for sale, not by choice, by necessity. But Helena bought it before anyone else could make an offer. And then, she did something unexpected. She didn't evict them. She let Richard and Victoria keep living there, as tenants, paying rent. Rent she never collected, but they both knew they owed it. Victoria aged 10 years in 6 months. Her once immaculate hair turned grey. Her hands trembled constantly. She stopped going out, stopped answering the phone, because she knew that everyone who called wanted only one thing: gossip. How's the family now that the bastard came back? The word bastard echoed in her mind like a curse, because now she understood. Helena was never the bastard. They were. Richard made one last move. He went to the press. He gave interviews, told his side of the story, said he had been deceived, that Clara had lied, that he had tried to do the right thing. But no one believed him, because Helena said nothing, and her silence was more powerful than any defense. She simply published an old photo, 5-year-old Helena eating alone in the back kitchen while the family dined in the main hall. The photo was enough. Richard was publicly condemned. His interviews became memes, his reputation ashes. Then the inevitable happened. Richard had a stroke. Victoria found him collapsed in his office, surrounded by financial papers and empty whiskey bottles. He was rushed to the hospital. He survived, but barely. The left side of his body was paralyzed, his speech slurred, his mind lucid, but trapped inside a body that no longer obeyed. And it was Helena who paid for the hospital. Victoria received the news over the phone, from a lawyer. All of Mr. Ashford's medical expenses are being covered by Miss Whitmore. Victoria stayed silent for a long moment. Then, her voice trembling, she asked, "Why?" "She didn't say. She just told us to pay." Victoria hung up, and for the first time in years, she felt something she could no longer name: shame. Helena visited Richard 3 weeks after the stroke. She arrived at the hospital without notice, without an escort, just her, wearing a simple coat and carrying a small bag. The nurse recognized her immediately. "Miss Whitmore," she began, but Helena raised a hand. "I just came to see how he's doing." She was led to the private room where Richard lay. He was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. The left side of his face drooped. His eyes were dull and distant. When Helena entered, he turned slowly, and when he saw her, his eyes filled with tears. "Hey, Helena!" The word came out slurred, heavy. She approached quietly and sat in the chair beside his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard tried to speak. I'm sorry." Helena didn't answer immediately. She just looked at him, at the man who had once thrown her out, now crying like a child. "You're sorry?" she asked softly, her voice sharp as glass. Are you truly sorry? Or are you only sorry because now I have the power? Richard closed his eyes. Fresh tears rolled down his face. I was a coward, he managed. A monster. Helena leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. You were, she agreed. But you know what's worse? I didn't come here to hear apologies. I came so you'd understand something. Richard opened his eyes, confused. I paid for your hospital. I paid your bills. I let you and Victoria stay in the mansion. Not because I'm kind, not because I forgave you. She paused and her voice dropped to a cold whisper. But because I want you to live long enough to remember, every single day, what you did. Richard sobbed. A broken, pitiful sound. Please, forgive... Helena stood. Forgiveness is for those who repent before they lose everything. You only repented when you had no choice left. She walked to the door. Then, without looking back, she said, I'll keep paying, because I want you to live long enough. Every day will be a reminder, every breath a regret, and when you finally die, you'll be free. But until then, you'll carry this. And she left. A year later, Helena received an official request. Through a lawyer, Victoria had requested a meeting. She, Richard, and Victoria's 3 children, Helena's half-siblings, who had never acknowledged her, wanted to speak with her. Helena read the letter and almost refused, but then something inside her, perhaps curiosity, perhaps cruelty, made her accept. She scheduled the meeting at the mansion, in the main hall, where everything had begun. They arrived before she did, all 5 of them. Richard in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse, Victoria beside him, aged and frail, and the 3 children, Marcus, Thomas, and Isabella, their expressions hovering between fear and desperation. When Helena entered, they all stood, except Richard, who couldn't. She looked at them one by one, then walked to the main armchair, the one where Richard used to sit, and sat down. Speak, she said simply. Victoria took a step forward. Her hands trembled. Helena, her voice failed. She tried again. We came to ask for forgiveness. Helena didn't respond. She just waited. Marcus, the eldest son, cleared his throat. We know there's no excuse. We know we treated you like garbage. Like you weren't even human. His voice cracked. And now we're paying for it. And we deserve to. Thomas, the middle one, added, but we're here, humble, asking, not for ourselves, but for what's left of our family. Isabella, the youngest, was crying. I was a child, she said between sobs, but I saw it. I saw how they treated you. And I did nothing. I was a coward. And I'm sorry, I really am. Helena watched them. She saw the desperation, the shame, the pain. And then she saw something else, herself, years ago, alone, broken, silently begging for a single act of humanity. But they hadn't given it. Richard, with great effort, lifted the hand that still worked. Helena looked at him. He tried to speak. The words came out slurred, almost unintelligible. You destroyed me, and I deserve it. He paused, gasping for breath. But please, don't destroy them. Helena remained silent for a long time. The clock on the wall marked each second like the beating of a dying heart. Then she stood. She walked to Richard, stood before him, looked down at the man who once seemed like a giant, now just a broken old man in a wheelchair. You want me to spare your children? She asked, her voice calm, almost gentle. Richard nodded, tears rolling down his paralyzed face. Helena crouched, bringing her eyes level with his. I'm not going to destroy them, she said. Do you know why? Richard shook his head, confused. Because I'm not you. She stood again and turned to the others. You want forgiveness? You want me to say it's all right, that we can be one happy family now? Victoria took a step forward, her hands clasped as if in prayer. We don't expect to be family, she said, her voice trembling. Just that you don't hate us forever. Helena gave a bitter laugh. Hate you? She shook her head. I don't hate you. Hate requires caring, and I stopped caring the day I walked through that gate. She pointed toward the window, to the iron gate visible in the distance. Do you know what I felt that night? When the rain was falling and my feet bled because you didn't even give me shoes? No one answered. I felt relief, Helena continued. Relief that I no longer had to pretend you were my family. Relief that the lie was finally over. Isabella sobbed louder. Thomas lowered his head. Marcus closed his eyes. And do you know what I learned in the years that followed? Helena paced slowly across the room. I learned that family isn't blood. It's not a last name. It's not this mansion or these hollow traditions. She stopped and looked at each of them. Family is the one who embraces you when you're broken, who gives you dignity when the world denies it, who sees you when everyone else makes you invisible. Her voice grew stronger, steadier. Theodore Whitmore was my family. He, who knew me for only 2 years, gave me more love than you did in 17. He saw me. He recognized me. He gave me a name that carried no shame. Victoria fell to her knees, her hands covering her face. "Forgive me," she repeated like a prayer. "Forgive me, forgive me." Helena looked at her, at the woman who had once seemed so powerful, so superior, now kneeling on the floor like a beggar, and something inside Helena stirred. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close to understanding. "Stand up," she said softly. They obeyed slowly. Victoria stumbled and Marcus caught her. Helena took a deep breath. "I'm not going to destroy you," she said finally. "Not because you deserve mercy, but because I deserve peace." She paused. "The mansion will remain yours. The debts I paid are settled. I want no reimbursement, no gratitude. I just want you to live with the weight of what you did, because that weight, that guilt, is the only justice that matters." Richard exhaled a shaky breath. Victoria covered her face. "But," Helena continued, her voice hardening, "do not look for me. Do not call me. Do not try to be part of my life, because you are not my family. You never were, and you never will be." She walked to the door, stopped, and without turning back said, "Theodore taught me that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering and choosing not to let the past steal your future. So I choose to move on without you." And she left, this time for good. 5 years later, Helena sat in a cafe in Paris. The Eiffel Tower was visible through the window. The afternoon sun bathed the city in golden hues. She wasn't alone. Beside her sat a woman with grey hair and a gentle smile, sipping tea. It was Margaret, the nurse who had cared for Theodore. They had become friends, confidants, chosen family. "You look at peace," Margaret said, studying Helena. Helena smiled, a real smile. The hardness was gone, the buried pain finally quiet. "I am," she replied. "At last." Margaret nodded. "And the foundation, how is it doing?" "Better than I ever dreamed," Helena said, her eyes shining. "We've already helped more than 3,000 young people. Housing, education, psychological support, everything I never had, they have now." The Whitmore Mendes Foundation had been created by Helena 2 years earlier. It was dedicated to young people expelled from home, abandoned by their families, rejected by society. Each life saved was a silent response to what had been done to her. Each future rebuilt was the greatest revenge of all. "Theodore would be proud," Margaret said, squeezing Helena's hand. "I know," Helena replied softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I feel him every day." That night, Helena returned to her apartment. It wasn't large, it wasn't extravagant, but it was hers, truly hers. She lit the fireplace, made tea, wrapped herself in a blanket, and sat in her armchair. Her phone buzzed. A message. It was from an international charity organization. They wanted her to be the keynote speaker at an event about resilience and overcoming adversity. Helena smiled, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a drawer beside the armchair and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were 2 things: her mother's letter, yellowed, wrinkled, but carefully preserved, and a photo of Theodore, smiling, with Helena by his side. She ran her fingers over the picture and whispered, "Thank you for finding me, for seeing me, for giving me a name I could carry with pride." Then she placed everything back in the box, and finally replied to the message, "I accept. It will be an honor to share my story." The news reached Helena on a winter morning. Richard had died, heart attack, in his sleep, without pain. Helena received the message by email from a lawyer. He informed her that the funeral would be private, and that she was not expected to attend. She read the email 3 times, then closed her laptop. She felt nothing, or rather, she felt the emptiness where pain used to live, and somehow that was freeing. But 2 days later, something unexpected happened. Isabella, Victoria's youngest daughter, showed up at Helena's door. It was night, cold. Isabella wore a simple coat and carried a small bag. When Helena opened the door, the girl's eyes were red. "I know you don't want to see us," Isabella said quickly, before Helena could speak. "I know I have no right to be here, but I had to." Helena stood still, hand on the doorknob. "What do you want?" Isabella took a deep breath. "My father died. You know that." Helena nodded. And I know you don't care, Isabella continued, her voice breaking. And you have every right not to care. But I needed to tell you something. Helena waited. Isabella wiped her tears. He talked about you. In the last few years. He talked about you a lot. She paused, trying to steady her voice. He said you were the only good thing he ever did, and that destroying you was the greatest mistake of his life. Helena felt something shift inside her, but she said nothing. He made me promise, Isabella went on, that I would come to you, not to ask for anything, not to seek forgiveness, only to say that he regretted it, every day, until the end. She extended an envelope. He wrote this for you. I don't know what it says, but he made me swear I'd deliver it. Helena looked at the envelope. She didn't take it immediately. Why you, she asked. Why not Victoria? Why not your brothers? Isabella gave a sad smile. Because I was the only one you saw as human, even when everyone ignored you. I know you saw me. I was a child, and you never treated me with anger. Helena remembered. It was true. Isabella had only been 6 when Helena was expelled. Just a child. You're not guilty, Helena said at last. Isabella let out a shaky sob. But I could have been better. I could have asked where you were. I could have cared. You were a child, Helena repeated, firmer now. And children do what adults tell them. She finally took the envelope. Thank you for bringing it. Isabella nodded, then turned to leave. Isabella, Helena called. She stopped. If you ever need something, truly need something, not for the family, for you, come to me. Isabella looked back, surprised, then smiled through her tears. Thank you, and left. Helena closed the door, looked at the envelope, sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was shaky, hard to read, but legible. Helena, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. And maybe that's the kindest thing the universe could have done for me. I won't ask for forgiveness, not because I don't regret it, but because I know some things can't be forgiven with words. I destroyed you. I know that. And I spent the last years of my life trying to understand how I could have done it. The truth is simple and pathetic. I was a coward. I was afraid of Victoria, afraid of society, afraid of losing my reputation, and I placed that fear above your life. You were just a child, and I treated you like a problem to be erased. There's no excuse, no justification, but I want you to know in those final years when you came back, when you showed me that you had survived, that you had thrived, I felt something I never expected to feel. Pride. Pride that despite me you became someone extraordinary, someone with compassion, with strength, with dignity. You are everything I should have been, and never was. I don't expect this to change anything. I don't expect you to cry for me, or forgive me. I only hope that one day when you think of me you feel nothing, because nothing is better than hate, and you deserve peace. Live well, Helena. Live fully. And know that even though I never deserved it, you were always more my daughter than I ever was your father. Richard Ashford. Helena finished reading, folded the letter slowly, placed it back into the envelope, and then, finally, she cried. Not for Richard, not for forgiveness, not for regret, but because at last the weight had lifted. She cried for the girl she once was, for the woman she had become, for the father she lost and the father she found. She cried until there were no more tears, and when she stopped she felt something new, freedom. 3 years after Richard's death, Helena did something no one expected. She returned to the mansion, not to confront, not to demand, but to close a circle. Victoria still lived there. Now 72 years old, frail, almost transparent. She lived alone, cared for by a nurse. When Helena arrived, the nurse recognized her instantly. Miss Whitmore, I didn't know you were coming. I didn't announce it, Helena said softly. Is she awake? Yes. She's in the garden. Helena walked through the house. The hallways that once seemed enormous now felt small, empty, haunted. She stepped outside into the garden. There was Victoria, sitting in a rocking chair, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the flowers. Helena approached slowly. Victoria heard her footsteps, turned, and when she saw Helena, her face lit up, then twisted in shock and fear. Helena, she whispered. Hello, Victoria, Helena said, taking the seat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Victoria asked, Did you come to evict me? Helena gave a sad smile. No, I came to give you something. She reached into her bag and handed Victoria an envelope. Victoria took it with trembling hands. She opened it. Inside was a legal document. What is this? The deed to the mansion, Helena said calmly. I'm transferring it back to you. Officially. Victoria's eyes widened. But why? Helena sighed. Because I don't need it anymore. This house, it represents everything I've overcome, and holding on to it feels like staying trapped in the past. She looked straight at Victoria. You can live here as long as you want. No rent, no debt. It's yours. Victoria began to cry, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. I don't deserve it. No, Helena agreed. You don't. But I deserve peace, and peace means letting go. Victoria covered her face with her hands. Forgive me, she whispered. I know I've asked 1,000 times, but please, forgive me. Helena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something she herself didn't expect to say. I forgive you. Victoria lifted her head, stunned. What? I forgive you, Helena repeated, firmer now. Not because what you did was right, but because holding on to anger has been keeping me from truly living. She stood up. You don't have to do anything with that. You don't have to thank me. Just live the rest of your days knowing that I moved on, and that you no longer have any power over me. Victoria sobbed. Thank you, thank you. Helena nodded and left, but this time without the weight on her shoulders. 2 years later, Helena stood on a stage. The auditorium was packed, more than 5,000 people, bright lights, cameras rolling. She wore a simple dress, no excessive jewelry, only Theodore's ring, and she spoke. My name is Helena Whitmore Mendes, and for 17 years of my life, I was treated like a ghost. The audience was utterly silent. I lived in a mansion, but I slept in the back quarters. I ate alone. I had no friends, no birthday parties, no hugs. She paused. Because I was the family's shame, the bastard daughter, the mistake. Someone in the audience sobbed softly. And when my mother died, they threw me out. On a rainy night, with no money, no shoes, nothing. She looked straight into the camera. But I survived. And not only did I survive, I thrived. I found my real father. I received love. I found dignity. And I became the person I was always meant to be. The audience began to applaud, but Helena raised her hand. Don't applaud yet, because the hardest part wasn't surviving, it was forgiving. Silence fell again. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean saying that what happened was okay. Forgiving means choosing not to let the past define your future. She took a deep breath. I forgave the people who hurt me, not for them, but for me, because I deserved peace. And peace only comes when you let go of the weight. Tears streamed down several faces in the audience. If you're hearing me now, if you've been rejected, abandoned, expelled, humiliated, I want you to know, you are not the mistake. You are not the shame. You are human, and you deserve love. The audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, and Helena, for the first time in her life, felt that she truly belonged. Helena was 35 years old when Victoria died. It was a peaceful death. In her sleep, without pain. Helena received the news over the phone, from Isabella. She asked me to tell you, Isabella said, her voice trembling, and she asked me to give you something. At the funeral there were few people. Marcus, Thomas, Isabella, a few distant cousins. And Helena. She stood at the back. She didn't want attention. She only watched. When it was over, Isabella approached. She left this for you. It was a small wooden box. Old. Helena opened it. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photo was of Clara, young, smiling, and on the back, written by hand, for Helena. Your mother was the kindest person I ever met. Forgive me for not protecting her. Victoria. Helena stared at the photo for a long time, then opened the letter. Helena, if you're reading this, I've already gone, and perhaps that's the last mercy I deserve. I spent the final years of my life trying to understand why I was so cruel to you, and the answer is simple. I was jealous. Jealous of Clara, the woman Richard truly loved, even if only for a short time. Jealous of you, the living proof of that love. Jealous of everything I never had. Authenticity. I spent my life constructing an image, a perfect marriage, a perfect family, a perfect last name, and it was all a lie. You, even when treated as nothing, were more real than I ever was. And that terrified me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know, you won. Not because you destroyed me, but because you became everything I only pretended to be. You have compassion, strength, dignity, truth. I had none of that, only fear. Thank you for letting me die in peace, for giving this house back to me, for not crushing me when you easily could have. You are better than I ever was, and I'm sorry. More than words can express. Live well, Helena. Live free, and know that wherever I am proud of the woman you became, in spite of me. Victoria. Helena folded the letter, placed it in her bag, looked up at the sky and smiled. Not a smile of victory, but of release. That night, Helena returned to her apartment, lit the fireplace, made tea, and took out a notebook. She began to write, not a letter, not a diary, but a book about her story, about pain, about rejection, about resilience, about forgiveness. She wrote all night, and when the sun rose, she had finished the first chapter. The title, The Ghost Daughter, How I Survived the Family That Cast Me Out and Found My Own Light. 6 months later, the book was published. It became an international bestseller within 3 weeks. Helena was invited to television shows, podcasts, conferences. Her story touched millions, and more importantly, it saved lives. Letters began to arrive. Hundreds, then thousands, from young people expelled from home, from those rejected by their families, from unacknowledged children, from ghosts who finally felt seen. Helena answered them all, personally, because she knew what it was to scream into the void, and she never wanted anyone else to feel that way again. 10 years later, Helena sat on a park bench. The sun was shining. Children were playing. The world kept turning. Beside her sat a 16-year-old girl, dark hair, frightened eyes. "I have nowhere to go," the girl said, her voice trembling. Helena took her hand. "Yes, you do. You have the foundation. You have me. And most importantly, you have yourself." The girl began to cry. "How did you do it? How did you survive?" Helena smiled softly. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, and by remembering that the past doesn't define who you are. You do." The girl nodded, wiping her tears. "Do you think I'll make it?" "You will," Helena said firmly, "because you're stronger than you think, and because you're not alone." The girl hugged Helena, and Helena hugged her back. And in that embrace, the circle finally closed. The ghost had become light, and that light now illuminated others. Some ghosts don't return to haunt. They return to give back the silence that once created them. And when they finally speak, the whole world listens. Because the voice of someone who has survived the abyss is a voice that can never be silenced. This is the story of Helena, the ghost daughter who became light. A story of pain, but also of healing. Of revenge, but also of forgiveness. Of destruction, but also of reconstruction. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's becoming so whole, so fulfilled, so at peace, that they become irrelevant. Now leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what you thought of this story. Thank you, and see you in the next video.